Howdy y'all, thank you for joining me for another incredible video. Today we're going to be diving into the current narrative history of the Vatican and looking at all of the anomalies, but most importantly, looking at the oldest photographs of the Vatican that you may have never seen before. Let's try to peel back the layers of convoluted history and dive into one of the most important but misunderstood locations on our planet. Vatican City is a city-state, a micro-state, a landlocked sovereign country, an enclave within Rome, Italy. Vatican City operates outside the jurisdiction of Italy and is under full ownership of the Holy See. Vatican City, also known as the Vatican City State, operates outside international law. Vatican City has no taxes and items are duty-free. Vatican City takes up less than 0.2 square miles or 121 acres of land, and the population is under 800 permanent residents, making this the smallest state in the world by both area and population. The Vatican was once an intricate series of fortifications, some of them bastion or star forts, with the residue of this being visible on modern-day aerial photographs. Today, we're going to take an epic deep dive into the history of Vatican City, from the origins of the name itself, through the oldest known images and photographs taken of Vatican City, through the Italian Revolution, weaving our way into the proverbial narrative, looking for any anomalies that stand out. The etymology of the name Vatican, like much of ancient history, is something that is still argued and pondered over by modern-day scholars, but there's a lot of food for thought to be digested here. The name Vatican may be derived from the archaic Etruscan settlement of Vatica, which is believed to have existed on what is today known as Vatican Hill. Vatica itself being named for one of the main gods of childbirth, known as Vaticanus, who was said to be the literal voice of wailing, but more directly, Vaticanus was the concept of a healthy baby being born, as the wail of Vaticanus, a child's first cry, indicated the child possessed all the characteristics of health, and many prayers were said to have been given to Vaticanus throughout ancient times. Vaticanus can be related directly to the Latin noun vagitus, meaning wailing or crying, particularly by a newborn baby. Others, such as Augustine of Hippo, do claim the name Vatican is derived from a deity, but the word Vatican in this theory actually means the prophecies, as the hill, which became known as the Vatican, is where countless miracles were said to have occurred and where many Romans were said to have gone to find religious clarity. Extrapolating on this further, legend states that a Roman plebeian or common-born began receiving what he perceived to be messages from the higher power while on the hills at the outskirts of Rome. This voice, which the common-born man believed to be the all-powerful, warned the man of an incoming Gaulish attack and told him to reinforce the walls of Rome with bastions. The common man took his epiphany to the tribune of the plebes, but was quickly rebuked. However, just a few months later, the Gauls did in fact invade, sack, and destroy the city of Rome in 390 BC. Following the repelling of the invasion, the Roman government decided to rebuild the city, and during this, they erected a massive temple and altar to honor this unknown deity who had warned of the attack. Many now believe that this temple sat at the base of Vatican Hill and was a main location of pilgrimage for those believed to be clairvoyant who held office in Rome, also known as the state augurs. Furthermore, the augurs or soothsayers, the prophets of Rome that predated Christianity but helped shape the original Roman religion, would use the study of patterns to create the basis for Roman worship. This included the study of the behavior of birds, but more so the augurs of Rome made decisions for Rome based off the study of the liver of the victims of the regular sacrifice which occurred in the city. This pagan practice was known to the Romans as Vaticini or Vaticini, or the Etruscan discipline, and it had apparently been introduced to Rome from the Etruscans. We're told directly after the founding of Rome, really from the beginning of Roman history, Rome was in a love-hate relationship with the neighboring Etruscan kingdom of Veii. When the Romans finally conquered Veii in 396 BC, we're told the tradition was kept in place of practicing sacrifice on the hills outside of Rome, including the Vatican Hill. We're told the entirety of this area that is today known as the Vatican City was home to this sacrifice and undesirable conditions. It was very much a lower class region at the time, not considered part of Rome, and when it was not being used for this type of worship, it was said to have been home to the poor who lived outside of the city. However, in the 1st century BC, the triumphant road was completed, essentially the first clear and constructed path connecting Rome to Veii. This fortified path passed directly through what is today the Vatican City. Along this path, the richest families of both Roman and Etruscan origin began to construct lavish homes known as horti. From the horti arose a new subculture of Rome, which was headed by the growing elite. And during the 1st century AD through the 2nd century AD, an extremely elegant and fortified garden palace was created on the exact location that Vatican City sits today. This was known as the Gardens of Agrippina. After her passing, her son with Germanicus, Caligula, inherited the entirety of the gardens and mostly all of the Vatican Hill. A chariot enthusiast, we're told, single-handedly, Caligula transformed the foundations on Vatican Hill into a massive Roman circus, a large open-air hippodrome for chariot racing and other events. According to many historians, the circuses of Rome served as the proverbial temple, home, and seat of the Republic for a vast majority of the Roman population who were common-born. The Circus of Caligula also was adorned with the Vatican Obelisk, brought to Rome in 40 AD by Caligula. I would not be doing my due justice if we did not discuss this obelisk briefly. First, the Vatican Obelisk has an unknown date, an unknown origin, and contains 0 hieroglyphics or original inscriptions indicating where it was truly from. According to the currently accepted narrative, the Vatican Obelisk is Egyptian, yet this information is only derived by the inscriptions that came at a much later time. Second, the Vatican Obelisk is the only obelisk in Roman history to have never fallen, standing proudly since being installed on the Vatican Hill in 40 AD. Of the 12 other obelisks in Rome, every single one has previously fallen or been destroyed and rebuilt. Third, the Vatican Obelisk is made of red granite and originally stood at least 25 meters tall. But even more fascinating, the Vatican Obelisk was originally topped by a bronze globe whose exact function was unknown, but was once believed to contain the life force and ashes of Julius Caesar. When the Circus of Caligula fell into disrepair, remarkably, we're told that most of Vatican Hill became a necropolis, becoming vastly overgrown. The Vatican obelisk remained standing, albeit almost entirely misunderstood, until September the 10th of 1586. At that time, Pope Sixtus V ordered that the obelisk be moved roughly 800 feet from outside Old St. Peter's Basilica to the location for the new basilica. The moving of the obelisk took over 1 year of planning, with 900 men, 75 horses, and 40 winches being used to complete the task in one single day, and without ever tipping the obelisk horizontally. The relocation was deemed symbolic, yet after completion, numerous other ancient obelisks around Rome were also commissioned to be relocated. At the time, the Pope granted 10 years of perpetual indulgence for completing a pilgrimage to the Vatican obelisk, which led many to speculate during the Renaissance time period that Sixtus had actually placed a piece of the true cross of Jesus within the obelisk. This belief was held until roughly 1740, when the cross atop the obelisk which replaced the earlier bronze ball, was examined and the theory was discredited. Further, modern excavations in the early 2000s revealed underground burial chambers across most of the outskirts of Vatican City, what may constitute burial mounds or tells. The excavations only revealed a minimal portion of what is believed to be a vast stretch of interconnected burial mounds and earthworks located beneath, at least in part, the Vatican City. However, due to the political importance and climate, conducting excavations within Vatican City is nearly impossible. Now, tying this all back to the history of the Vatican City, after Caligula constructed the massive hippodrome in 40 AD on Vatican Hill on top of the former gardens of Agrippina, the hippodrome or circus was then handed down to Emperor Nero, who opened the circus to the entirety of the Roman people, making it one of the first public circuses in Rome and also gaining the hippodrome the moniker of the Circus of Nero. When the Great Fire of Rome struck the city in July of 64 AD, 10 of the 14 districts of Rome burned completely. The fire lasted for over a week, and by the end of the fire, over 70% of all of Rome's buildings were completely destroyed. Seeking vengeance, while others claim he was persuaded to do so by his council, we are told almost directly after the fire ceased, Nero ordered the persecution of the Christians to be conducted in the location where the fire was believed to have begun, within the circus. Tradition claims that amongst those who lost their lives by order of Nero was St. Peter, who was reportedly crucified upside down on Vatican Hill inside the fallen circus. This becomes even more important to theology as St. Peter, also known as St. Simon, St. Simeon, or Simon Peter, is recorded as being the first bishop of Rome, a title which you may know better as the Pope. St. Peter is also considered to be the longest reigning pope in all of history, serving from 30 AD when he was appointed that position by Jesus. Because Peter was the first to whom Jesus appeared, the leadership of Peter forms the basis of the church succession and the institutional power of the orthodoxy. Peter is regarded as the first leader of the church and the rock on which the church was built. This adds even more fuel to our discussion of architecture, as the foundations of Vatican City appear to be formed quite literally from the pieces of earlier structures, which was also the location used for sacrificing and auguring by ancient pagan leaders of Rome. On Vatican Hill also existed numerous other substantial structures, first from the lower class who resided there, and then from the upper class of Rome who would go on to inherit these lands after the founding of the first triumphant road. Amongst the structures once situated on Vatican Hill was a massive pyramid structure, visible in some early artistic depictions of the region. This was known as the Pyramid of Romulus, or the Vatican Pyramid. The lands of the Vatican Hill were said to represent an ideal area to build the monumental tombs of the members of the Roman upper class. However, while historians claim this, they don't actually know who built the Vatican Pyramid, when it was built, or even who it was built for. The Vatican Pyramid was located directly south of another massive mausoleum on Vatican Hill known as the Terebinth of Nero. The Terebinth was essentially a massive burial mound, a giant tumulus tomb lined with two enormous marble cylinders, and this terebinth was also of unknown origin and was regarded as the largest burial mound in all of Rome. Remarkably, those in the Middle Ages believe St. Peter actually lost his life underneath a terebinth and came to believe that this burial mound was in fact the location of his passing. According to mainstream scholars, both the Vatican Pyramid and the Vatican Burial Mound were built out of fine stonework and survived through the founding of Old St. Peter's Basilica. However, when materials became scarce during the building of this basilica, both the Vatican Pyramid and the Vatican Burial Mound began to be pillaged for their stones, which were later used to build out much of the early Catholic buildings that existed on Vatican Hill. Remarkably, as construction began on the old basilica in the 4th century AD, we are told that the numerous pagan temples along the Vatican Hill, the same temples once used for sacrifice and soothsaying or predicting the future, remained in usage. The mainstream narrative continues by telling us that Vatican Hill was also greatly associated not just with Vatica and the Etruscan concept and deities for childbirth, but also went hand in hand with the concept of the cult of Cybele. Cybele is essentially the mother goddess, the eternal maternal force which has influence on all things, the Mother Earth, or the divine quality of maternal instincts apparent in all living creatures, the nurturing force of the world, as we may call it. Cybele was the only goddess in the entire Phrygian culture and pantheon, and was the main, some say the only deity worshipped by the Phrygians. In Rome, Cybele became known as the Magna Mater, or the Great Mother, and furthermore, Cybele was adopted as a deity of Rome according to orders by the augurs and the soothsayers and the oracles in roughly the year 200 BC. If you're unfamiliar, we also have the concept of the Phrygian people greatly influencing everything that was Greek, and Greek itself being the greatest influence for Rome. Essentially, theorists claim much of Rome was adapted into the cultures and the societies that we have today, meaning through the transitive property, much of the culture and society we have today across the world is of a Phrygian origin. Furthermore, the Phrygians are most likely closely related to the Scythians and may be the earliest horde of that particular people. The Phrygians were said to have brought equestrianism to ancient Greece, thus domesticating horses, which would go on to profoundly reshape the course of history. The Phrygians fell out of history by roughly 600 BC, mostly being assimilated into the cultures which they migrated into. Many of the earliest myths and legends in history actually involve the Phrygians, including King Gordius of Phrygia and the Gordian Knot, as well as King Midas of Phrygia and the Golden Touch. We also are told that Phrygians were possibly the first mound builders in the world, which leads us to an abundance of questions regarding the origins of mounds and tells found across the earth, including the mounds of ancient America, which are nearly identical to the ancient Phrygian mounds. We're told the Phrygians are directly associated with the Phoenicians, and the Phrygian alphabet is one of the first to develop from the Phoenician teachings. We're also told the Phrygians are where the stories of the Amazonians developed from, as the Phrygians were described as being large, robust, and intelligent horse riders who became known to the Greeks for the constant war the Phrygians were in with their female counterparts, known as the Amazonians. Said to be equally robust and intelligent, the Amazonian women were described as being even larger in stature than the Phrygians. After the fall of Alexander the Great, the Phrygians are said to have amalgamated almost exclusively with the Greek and Celtic people, developing into their own unique group with their own unique characteristics. We're told the Phrygian religion was based off of shakers, essentially claiming Phrygian leaders would climb to the highest point that they could find, whether it be a mountain or natural feature, or they would construct a mound to be raised to a higher height, at which point they would conduct worship through elaborate rhythmic dancing and music known as shaking, which could be seen by everyone below. It appears from this early Phrygian concept we see why so many ancient European societies were using tells and mounds as places for worship. Also, the Phrygian cap, a red cap, has been adopted as the symbol of liberty and freedom since early antiquity, and depictions of the Phrygian cap were found in numerous artifacts discovered along the foundations of Vatican City. It appears there was a heavy Phrygian, some would say Scythian, some would even say Tartarian influence on early Vatican Hill. For a majority of the history of the papacy, the Pope did not actually reside on Vatican Hill. Here is where we come to another really interesting facet of this history. In roughly the 4th century BC, a leading member of the earlier mentioned tribune of the plebs, the lawmaking body of the common people of Rome, was elected as the first common man to ever achieve the rank of the consul of Rome. This man was Lucius Sextius Laternus. While the tribune decided laws, the consul, of which two were always operating in Rome at any time, were considered to be the highest ranking elected official in Rome. And much of what I read about the consul seems to allude to the fact that the consuls decided the ways in which the history was being written. They decided the inscriptions, they decided what different buildings would say, what the monuments would say, and what the history books would say. And during and after his time as the first plebe to achieve the rank of consul of Rome, Laternus gathered much territory throughout the Roman landscape. On the land of his family was built the first cathedral of Rome, which is the oldest cathedral in Rome that actually still stands today. However, also on their land was the palatial home of Laternus, which became known as the Lateran Palace. When Constantine confiscated the Lateran lands, he donated them to the papacy of Christianity, and the massive Lateran Palace was actually the home to the Pope for over 1,000 years. It was only when the papacy left Rome in the 1300s that the Lateran Palace fell out of use. From 1361 through roughly 1870, the papacy continued to move its home location, and when Italy annexed Rome from 1870 through 1929, the status of the home of the Pope became known as the, quote, Roman question. The situation was only resolved with the 1929 Lateran Treaty, which became effective on June 7th of that year and established the independent state of Vatican City and reaffirmed the special status of the Pope in Italy. The papacy remained neutral during World War II, and when Italy was involved heavily in conflict that seemed like it would reach well into Rome, both sides of the war attempted to leave Vatican City alone. So I'm going to wrap up my narrative on the Vatican City there. I found this history to be absolutely fascinating, but more than that, I found the photographs to be absolutely fascinating. And when we look at world history, when we look at the old world and the concept of a possibly unified sort of situation before we have the revolutions throughout the 19th century, we have the revolution in Italy. And one of the things that occurred is essentially, for the time being in the 1860s, we have the Vatican really losing a lot of its power. And it was only until the 1920s, 1929, when we have a treaty being signed that officially made the Vatican City what it is today. A lot of us may have thought that the Vatican has always been this sort of enigma in history, but realistically, this location has only really been utilized in the way that we know it for the last few centuries. But before that, we have a vast history that occurred on the Vatican Hill that did not directly involve Catholicism. So I found that to be really fascinating. I just wanted to share that with you. And I found it really interesting when we tie back to the earliest history we're told in this location that sat just outside of the fortified walls of Rome. We have sacrifices occurring, and we have Etruscan history, and we have history tied to the Scythians and the Phrygians, and all of this seems to culminate in what then became one of the most important locations to Rome. So again, it's absolutely fascinating history. I want to hear your opinion down below, and I wanted to end this video sharing with you over 100 stereoscopic or old world 3D photographs of Vatican City. These are absolutely amazing images and photographs that I have not seen shared anywhere else before. So I wanted to end the collection with something really unique. Again, let me know all your thoughts down below. I can't wait to hear from you. If you're not already, please consider subscribing to the channel. I have over 200 other videos where we probably have over 100,000 images, old world images, pre-1900 photographs, where we're looking at the most important cities all across our earth. So again, please consider subscribing. Share this video if you found anything interesting in the video. It really helps the channel to grow. And I thank you all so much for being here. I can't wait to talk to you on the next one.